Okay, well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our customer brown bag session this morning, focused on security. My name is Lisa Carnes, and I'll get things kicked off here really fast for us. So if you haven't been to one of our brown bag sessions before, we launched this series for our customers earlier this year, and we have them on the second, third, and fourth Tuesdays of every month. And they're designed to provide opportunities for our customers to spend some intimate time with one of our technical folks here at Sumo. And we focus on key technical topics. So today we have our security session being led by our principal product manager, Peter, and he's going to be covering UEBA with Sumo Logic. And I have opened up the chat and the Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in there and I will help monitor those, and I'll interrupt Peter to ask the questions if needed. But this session is for you all. So please feel free to ask any questions you'd like, and I'll kick it over to Peter now.
Thank you, Lisa. Can you hear me okay? Am I coming through?
Yep.
All right. Hi, sorry. Hi, everybody. My name is Peter Casimir. Like Lisa said, I'm Principal Product Manager, and I'm responsible for enterprise security applications, including Cloud SIEM Enterprise here at Sumo Logic. I've been at Sumo Logic for almost exactly 3 years now. I think my anniversary is next week. And I currently am working out of Austin, Texas. My contact information will be at the end of the presentation in case you have extra questions or would like more information. You'll be able to contact me there if you'd like. So let's jump into it. We're going to talk today about UEBA in Cloud SIEM Enterprise. And I guess the obvious first question is, what is UEBA? So UEBA is an acronym, just like everything else in the technical world these days, and it stands for User and Entity Behavioral Analytics. So that's a whole lot of words. What does it mean? So if you look at a typical SIEM security application like CSE, traditionally, these applications would be built using rules of some sort. So if you take log messages, records of data, you have defined some criteria where if you see a certain thing in a record, or in more advanced SIEMs like CSE and collections of records, or you see this event, then that event, then this event, then you create an alert. In CSE, what we call a signal. UEBA takes a different approach to that. UEBA is building a model of behavior for a specific entity. Entity could be a user, an IP address, a host. There's a number of different entities that CSE supports. It also supports custom entities. So it's actually tracking the individual behavior of each one of those entities, depending on how you've defined the UEBA rules, and modeling the behavior of that user, and then looking for abnormal behavior. The typical types of analytics include first seen. So the first time you see a behavior that hasn't happened in the historical baseline, or outlier. So there you're looking at a statistical variance from normal. So let's say that a user accesses the AWS APIs so much usually, and today we saw them hit 15,000 APIs a million times. That's very unusual. There might not be anything from a permissions perspective wrong with that, but it's still unusual behavior that might warrant some investigation, especially if it's coupled with other events or behaviors that are detected. So that's all it is in a nutshell. It's basically just taking a model of user behavior or entity behavior and looking for abnormal activity. So it's pretty simple in concept. So why do you want it? You want to show what's normal. You want to help identify what's abnormal. And you're looking for behaviors, not correlations. So again, historically, the the rules that are in SIEMs are based on correlations. I'm looking for a login from Russia. I'm looking for a login from China. I'm looking for a login from North Korea. Things like that. Whereas UEBA is saying, I'm looking for a login that this person has never logged in from before. And you don't have to define, what your list of countries are. Maybe they work in China, so China is normal. Now I don't have to create a match list that says, here's all my employees who work in China or who travel to China. Don't fire a signal for these, or even worse, false positive signals for those users. And you also have the ability here to detect things without having to write explicit rules for them. So you're looking for unknown behavior and not trying to think of every possible behavior that you have to write a rule for. So this also simplifies your rule set in SIEM significantly. One other common misconception is that UEBA is a product. Like you get UEBA or you get SIEM, and that's not true. UEBA is just a way of detecting events that any SIEM can have, and a complete SIEM should have both UEBA activity and the normal correlation activity. So why doesn't everyone just do UEBA out of the box? And why isn't it just just a normal everyday thing? Why is it kind of a newer concept in security? Well, there's a few challenges with UEBA. First of all, you have to have the data in the system. So you're looking for behavior. Well, you have to have the log data that shows that behavior. Second of all, it takes a while to implement if you don't have a good system. So if you're building machine learning and figuring out how to do these models and collecting all this data, then that can add time to the implementation. Again, you're building machine learning models, AI models. Do you have a data scientist on board? Do you know exactly how to define what you're looking for? And then if you do UEBA, I don't know if wrong is the right word, but it's easy to create UEBA definitions that generate way too many alerts. For example, if you're looking for user behavior and you build a model based on, say, the last day's worth of behavior, one day probably isn't sufficient to generate a model of what's normal. You probably need to do a week or a month even, or maybe even a quarter, depending on what that person does. So it's very easy to generate, and there's other ways to do it too many alerts. So that's a problem as well. Fortunately, CSE addresses all of these challenges. Of course, with the Sumo Logic platform and CSE, we already have, and if you're already a CSE customer, you know this, we already have very easy ways to get all the data into the system so that it's available to CSE. We also have already implemented these features for you, and automatically build the models, so you don't have to worry about the data science angle. You don't have to worry about figuring out how to set things up. In fact, we have, I think, something like 50 rules now out of the box. Last time I checked. So you don't even have to write your own rules and have to worry about thinking about what you care about looking for scene behavior or outlier behavior. So we're already addressing these challenges in a number of ways. And a couple other things that I'll call out is that we've taken an approach of using rules. I've said this a couple times now for anomaly detection. So there are some implementations of UEBA that are basically black boxes, and you have no way to see what they're doing. You don't know how the model is built. You don't know what criteria they're using, then there's no way to tune them. So if they do generate too many alerts, that's a problem. There's no way to get out of that. So as we have always done with CSE, we take pride in making sure that the way the system works is open and transparent. And we have continued to take that approach with UEBA. So we implemented UEBA using the rule framework that we have for the legacy correlation rules. And that means that you can define what model it's building, how long of a time it's building the model for, and things like that. And then finally, of course, with the insight algorithm in CSE, in addition to being able to tune those rules in the first place, you have a much better alert to noise ratio, where instead of getting, in this example, 112,000 signals in the last 7 days, you have 82 insights, which is much more consumable and addressable by the SOC. All right, so let's move on to some examples. I mentioned there's first seen and outlier rule rules in CSE now. So what are some examples of these things? So for first seen, you're looking for somebody logging in from a location that they normally don't log in from. So this is not the same thing as impossible travel. This person always logs in from the United States, and they logged in from North Korea this morning. Well, that probably is something you should investigate. But even if it's not maybe a known or suspected malicious location, let's say they logged in from, I don't know, Germany this morning. They don't travel to Germany. They're not ever in Germany. Why did they log in from Germany? So, that should raise an alert that in a match rule where you're looking for, impossible travel or a list of known or suspicious geolocations wouldn't catch at all. And in fact, during the beta program for this earlier this year, we had a customer that was participating in the beta, and on the very second day they had these rules running, they caught a such an authentication from a rare location, and in that case, I think it was Germany. Actually, it's weird that I picked that example. From one of their executives, who again normally worked out of San Francisco, I think, and was traveling and had gotten hacked while they were traveling, and they were able to catch that before the malicious actor was able to do anything in their system. So no ransomware attack, no exfiltration of data, nothing, because they caught that almost immediately and shut down that account. Other things, the first time you get an alert, let's say you get a multi-factor acceptance from a device you've never gotten multi-factor acceptance from before. That would not raise a flag at all using correlation rules. It's perfectly fine. It got accepted. And this happens a lot. People have been, getting access to old MFA devices or phishing, a valid account access. If it's valid, it's not going to trigger a rule. It might trigger something like a, geolocation rule, but, let's say that somebody phishes your account and you work in Las Vegas and they log in from Las Vegas, that's not going to trigger any alerts. So this kind of thing where you're seeing first seen from a new device, yes, you do have to tune that to make sure that you're not getting, a crazy amount of alerts. And yes, you probably will want to correlate that with other activity before you decide that it's actually some kind of malicious event. But that gives you a leg up. You've got your eyes open and looking at something that you wouldn't have before maybe it was too late. Over on the outlier rules, this is the same thing as first seen, but it's more statistical. So here you're looking for events that have occurred outside the statistical normal, or above a certain floor. So here you're looking for, say, a spike in login failures. So normally you get so many statistically login failures per day or per week from a user, and today we've gotten 10 times as many. Maybe somebody is trying to break into that account. Data exfiltration. So normally maybe somebody is downloading data to Dropbox or Google Drive or something like that. They do it as part of their job. But today they downloaded, 100 terabytes worth of data, or outbound emails. Normally they send so many, and today they sent several hundred, or they sent emails with huge attachments today, things like that. So again, these are very similar to each other, but outlier is more statistical and first seen is not. I saw a question come into the chat, so I'll answer that now. Are these tips and tricks strictly for CSE? I'm certainly using CSE as an example here, and talking about what we have in CSE, but any good UEBA system should have, should have these features. Now I know that some of our competitors, for example, have that black box thing that I talked about before and so on. I don't want to get into comparisons, but generally speaking, this is a good description of what UEBA should be. And then I got a question about, is UEBA additional cost? No, this is built into CSE and part of the application. All right, and I also want to call out that this UEBA, and typically, but I'm using CSE as an example here, is more than just detection. So with UEBA, we have the ability to monitor the activity of entities and generate some information about them that maybe we wouldn't be doing normally with correlation rules. So we can, for example, measure the amount of risk that an entity might have based on their behavior that normally we would only be able to do through alerts. So you have something like an entity timeline where you can see the events that the entity is generating over time. So you don't have to go back to log search and look for events and figure out what this person was doing for context. You can actually look. So here before, when I mentioned like the suspicious MFA from a new device, you could come into here and look and see what other things was that user doing. Is it normal behavior, or are they now exploring your network and hitting up all your APIs? And that's very easy to see in this view. Also, we have a new panel on our heads up dashboard, the heads up display of most active entities, and the active signals here is a first pass at risk level for the entities, and as we go forward in time, we'll be adding more sophisticated risk variables here as well. But this could tell you, like, well, we're seeing a lot of activity in terms of potential alerts coming from this list of entities. You can click through this to see a longer list and more details. You can click through each entity to see what that entity was doing. So for example, the timeline on the left is actually the J Smith laptop entity on the right. I think it was. So we have that in the product as well. All right, so let me show you a little bit about how UEBA is implemented. Give me just a second here, because I forgot to actually fire everything up and get this ready. All right, so here is our demo environment for Cloud SIEM Enterprise. And first, we're going to look at some rules. So let's go to rules. And unless we're really lucky, I am going to search for a first seen rule. And this demo environment has both the out-of-the-box ones that have the little Sumo icon and ones that they've written just for the demo environment. Let's pick one of the out-of-the-box ones. Okay, so here's a good one. First seen common Windows recon command. So in this model, in this rule, we've defined a set of things that we're looking for. So we're looking for a specific set of commands that can be run on a Windows host. And I'll come back to the tuning expression in a second. And then we tell it what kind of entity we want to track for this particular rule. So in this case, we're tracking users. You could put, again, any entities here. You can put multiple entities here if you like as well. And then you decide how you want to build the baseline. There's a couple ways to do that. And then you have some options to decide how long the baseline should take to build, how long the model should take, and then how long of a rolling period you're going to keep that model for. So it's continuously updating that model. But in this case, after 90 days, it'll start dropping old data. So over a period of 90 days, it will actually develop a 90-day model, but it will start actually looking for events after the first 7 days is basically what this is saying. And then the rest of this is pretty similar to, is the same as all of our other rules. So it will generate an insight and has certain names and summaries and tags and so on. So what this is doing is looking for users that are executing any of these commands. We also have a tuning expression on here that says to exclude any of the developer accounts because they're probably going to be running these. So that's a great example of using tuning expressions. But again, you're not having to write a match rule that's looking for each one of these things, or maybe this whole thing, and firing it every time. You only want to do it based on the model. So if the model says that they normally run a lot of these things, then it's going to ignore those, and only it's going to tell you if it runs one of these for the first time. What is the difference between global and per entity? So let me go back, because that's a good question that I actually don't remember the answer to. As soon as I saw that, I'm like, somebody's going to ask me, and I forgot how that is. Let me check. Oh, okay. So global means any user that it sees doing any of this activity, it's going to put in the model. Per entity means you can say user type, and then specify specific users like Peter and Lisa, and it will only build the models for Peter and Lisa and nobody else. That's the difference. So many, I forget about all of these things sometimes. So that's the first scene rules, and then the outlier rules. Let's go back to the list of rules again and pick another one. So the outlier rules are going to be extremely similar, except again, they're more statistical, so you have different options on them. So let's do outlier. And here you'll see a spike in AWS API calls, right? So again, you'll see, like, how does it determine what an API call is? So that's basically what the expression is all about. Again, we're excluding developers because they're probably going to be hitting the APIs a lot and in various different ways. Here we're building a daily baseline. So here you're saying, I'm looking for these, I'm basing the statistics on a daily sum or average. And then hourly, you could do hourly instead. And again, I'm looking for usernames and or actions. So even if it's not, so somebody's built a custom entity type called action, which is probably similar to a file, but file hash or file command, but probably in this case is an API call, would be my guess. So I'm building models for both users and actions. And again, I have the baseline options. And here in this case, it doesn't start creating signals till 15 days have passed. And I'm looking for an outlier for the count. So I'm looking for the number of API calls. And there's a couple of different options here. You can like average, distinct calls, max, min, etc. Right? I can put a specific record field. So again, this is only looking for sort of like the per entity before. This is looking only for a specific record field and not just any field in the record. And then you have these two options down here, which is the sensitivity and the minimum count value. So the sensitivity is very similar to it is in fact the number of standard deviations away. So here I'm looking for more than a single standard deviation from normal, which is pretty sensitive. You could push this up pretty significantly to 5 standard deviations and get a much better, I think I said that backwards. So that's pretty unsensitive. You can push it back down to 1 to make it less sensitive, which is how it is today. And again, that can help you tune the alerts that you're getting so that you're not getting a lot of false positives. And you can also define a floor. So even if it meets the sensitivity threshold, it won't fire a signal unless it exceeds this floor value. So I'm not, even if this person only does maybe 1, what is this, per week, per day, and today they did 4, well, obviously that's a significant outlier, but I really don't want to know if they're doing more than 5, or maybe in this case, you only want to know if they do it more than 30 or 100, something like that. So you can have a minimum value so that if they don't use it very much, then you're not, again, not firing a lot of signals that are probably false positives. But you can tune that however you want. It comes out of the box a certain way, but these are all options that are overridable by the customer. So then what happens when you have these rules? Well, let's go find a signal. And here's one right here. So the first time that somebody updated a Lambda function. So this user has has updated a Lambda function for the first time. So in the model period, which in this test one is 0. So that means it immediately starts looking for any activity, which is basically the same as a match rule. Tell me if this user has executed a Lambda function. So this isn't a great example. They probably put this in here just for the demo. And then it gives you all the normal information that you would see for any rule. So what was the record that matched, and give me the data that came out of it, and so on. What tags lined up. Let me find another one that maybe is a little more interesting. So again, we'll do rule type is, let's do outlier because they're more fun. Okay, so again, spike and API. This is the same one the rule we were looking at before. So in this case, A Thomas, this user A Thomas, and you can see if you have inventory information about A Thomas, so like from Active Directory, you can see who they are, what they did. And this is their behavior over time. This goes back, looks like a month or two. And you're seeing what their normal behavior is. And the line here is the threshold, is the standard deviation threshold that you have set. And you see that there have been other excursions above this threshold. That could be that we fired signals for each one of those, or it could be that they didn't exceed the floor in the model at that time, and so they didn't fire a signal. But at this point, it did. So you can see it has a sensitivity of 1, a minimum of 5, and the threshold, which is the number that the model has generated over time, is 36, and it's 36 now. It may not have been 36 back here. So we got 37, we got 38, still 37. So now we fired a signal. And again, you'll get all of the record data that came along with the signal. And these work just like any other signal in CSC. So they contribute to the insight algorithm. And if you get enough signals on a particular entity, then you'll get an insight. But you can always investigate the individual signals if you like as well. And again, just to show you some of the other things, here's the most active entities panel that I talked about before. And then we can bring up Jay Smith's page and see all the information about him. In our demo environment, we fire the same stuff every day or half a day or so. So that's why the signals look so regular up here. And then you can click on timeline to see the entity timeline for this user. And by default, it's set to 3 days, but you can change that. And in the timeline, you can see, any activity that we see. So what this is saying is in this time period, we saw 284 records that were, very similar. So we aggregate them together, but you can click on it and get the details for those records, and they'll all be in this list. Same thing is if you have a record that also generated a signal, you'll have a special icon for it. And if the signals generated any insights, you'll get icons for those as well, although those are just signals right there. So these are the 3 signals that got generated here. I don't know if there's any insights on this particular user. It doesn't look like it. And you can click through these to see even more details, like on the records list page or on the insight details. Let's look at this signal. So I can click on this signal and go to the specific signal that fired and see all the details for it. So yeah, so that's the demo. And before we go, I'll just mention that there's more to come here. We're not done with UEBA at this point. A number of features and additional rule types are coming. So one thing that's releasing in pretty short order is enhanced entity groups. Entity groups enable you to automatically set attributes for entities like users or computers based on inventory data. So for example, at the moment, users that are in a certain group can get automatically suppressed, or you can automatically add a tag to them, or you can increase their list level using a feature we call criticality in CSE, so that signals fire more or less easily for that particular entity. We're enhancing this to include any inventory attribute, whether it's normalized or not, and also to auto-define tags and tag schemas based on inventory data. So if you have an inventory attribute called location, we can create a tag schema called location and populate it with the values that you have in your inventory system automatically with the enhanced entity groups. And why is this important for you? But well, this is going to be a stepping stone for peer groups. The more information we have about the users, in addition to looking at their behavior over time, and also in addition to any explicitly defined relationships, we can define peer groups. So, we'll get to the point where we can detect that these people are developers and normally use the API or command line commands a lot, or this group of machines are test machines, and automatically suppress them or change their criticality. We detected that these people travel a lot to foreign countries, and so we want to look for certain things more with more sensitivity than others, things like that, where you don't have to go in and define match lists and rule tuning and so on. The machine learning and AI system will do it automatically. So that's coming. Entity attributes via rules. So again, very similar to entity groups, but using log records, you'll be able to define a rule that says if you see this in a log record, then automatically do something to the entity, and maybe even do it just for a period of time, like say for 30 days. So we see that this person is traveling to somewhere in Asia, and we want to automatically raise their criticality, just to make up something. Historical baseline is also coming. So that means instead of having to wait the 7 days or 15 days or whatever you've put on that rule, it will go back in the previous 7 or 15 or whatever days and generate a model based on historical data and immediately become active instead of having to wait the period of days to generate the initial model for that the first seen or outlier rule. And again, I mentioned that we're going to have additional rule types in the future as well. So we're not done with UEBA. This is, more than I would say a minimally viable solution. I wouldn't call it that, but this is certainly, our first robust UEBA set of features, and we're going to continue to build on that over time. All right, so that's pretty much it for me. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Again, you can put them in chat or the Q&A features in Slack, and I'll stop there.
That was awesome, Peter. Thank you. We'll just give it another minute or two in case anything rolls in the chat. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up after that. Oh, got one.
All right. I noticed that the MITRE framework is listed beneath the content. So yes, CSE has the MITRE framework built into it. So currently we're on the current version, which is I think 13.1. So all of our out-of-the-box rules any rule that applies has tactics, techniques, and sub-techniques tagged to it, so that you can track those. The way the tags work, if you're not familiar, is if they're on a rule, then the signal that gets generated will inherit those tags, and an insight that includes the signal will inherit those tags. So you have some idea of what kind of activity is going on. We also have a new feature coming out soon that's a MITRE threat coverage explorer, we're calling, that will show you your historical MITRE activity over time, and also show you theoretical coverage for the rules and log sources you have enabled on your environment, including the out-of-box and custom rules. If you have custom rules in your environment, then you have to manually add those tags, those rules yourself. And same thing for custom insights. If you have custom insights defined, you'll have to add those tags to those custom insights yourself. But the tag schema, which is kept up to date, is in CSE so that you don't have to manually enter all of that. Did that answer your question?
And Francis, I just looked up who your account manager is, because you mentioned it's not showing up for you in your SIM. So I'll let that person know to check into that with you, and see what's going on. Because Peter, the MITRE framework is available for all CSE users, right?
Yeah, all of our most of our out of the box rules. There's I think there's more than 800 rules now, and probably 780 of them have tags on them. Yeah, so they should show up automatically. Again, if you're not using our out of the box rules, some of our customers don't. If you have custom rules, then you have to manually add those tags to your rules. We don't automatically detect them.
Okay, awesome. Yes, Francis, I'll let your account manager know. His name is Kyle. Any other questions from the group?
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I guess we can call it. Let me stop the recording.